The sky was clear that night when Dr. Olivia Garcia spotted the unusual pattern. She blinked, adjusting her glasses as she stared at the monitor. The signal repeated, too regular to be natural. "Hey, Sam, take a look at this," she called to her colleague. Sam Baker walked over, coffee mug in hand. His eyes widened as he watched the screen. That's not random noise. Within hours, the Global Space Observatory buzzed with activity. Scientists huddled around screens, analyzing the strange signals coming from deep space. The year was 2137, and humanity had been searching the stars for signs of intelligent life for centuries. "It's definitely artificial," Olivia confirmed to the emergency board meeting. "The pattern repeats every 73 seconds, with slight variations that suggest encoded information." The GSO director nodded gravely. "We need to inform the Security Council immediately." 3 days later, Captain John Mercer stood at attention in the United Earth Defense Force headquarters. The large screen behind General Laura Winters displayed the signal patterns. "Captain, you're being assigned to coordinate our contingency response," the general explained. "We don't know if this is a greeting or a warning, but we need to be prepared." John's expression remained neutral, but his mind raced. After years of training for theoretical alien contact, it was actually happening. "Yes, General. I'll assemble my team right away." While Olivia and her team worked to decode the message, defense forces around the world went on quiet alert. No public announcements were made to prevent panic, but military satellites were repositioned and dormant defense systems activated. "We've got something," Olivia said 2 weeks later, her voice tense as she addressed the Joint Scientific Military Committee. "It's not a complete translation, but there are repeated symbols we believe represent coordinates and timing." Before she could elaborate further, alarms blared throughout the facility. "Unidentified object entering solar system," announced the automated system. "Current velocity, 0.3 c and decelerating." The room fell silent. Something was approaching Earth at nearly 1/3 the speed of light. Over the next 48 hours, the object slowed and changed course multiple times, demonstrating intelligent control. All attempts at communication went unanswered. "It's heading directly for Earth orbit," John reported, watching the trajectory plots with growing concern. Estimated arrival in 6 hours. World leaders gathered in emergency session as the alien vessel entered Earth orbit. It was massive, nearly 3 miles long with a metallic hull that seemed to shift colors under Earth's sunlight. "Still no response to our transmissions," Olivia said, fatigue evident in her voice after working nonstop for days. The ship hung over Earth like a silent predator for nearly 12 hours. Then, without warning, every communication device on the planet received the same message simultaneously. "Attention inhabitants of Sol 3. You have been evaluated and selected for incorporation into the Hyraxian Empire. Your technological development has reached sufficient level for limited participation in galactic affairs under our guidance. You will be assigned appropriate status and resource quotas. You have 30 standard cycles to prepare your leadership for the formal submission ceremony. Resistance is historically unsuccessful and will result in appropriate corrective measures." The message repeated in all major Earth languages, leaving no doubt about its intent. In the UEDF command center, John Mercer's jaw tightened as he looked at the stunned faces around him. "So they're not here to make friends," he said grimly. Olivia studied the message again. "They didn't even introduce themselves properly before demanding our surrender." General Winters stood, her expression resolute. "Captain Mercer, I believe your contingency planning just became our top priority." Outside, people pointed at the strange ship visible in the daytime sky, unaware that humanity had just been given an ultimatum that would change Earth forever. The United Nations Assembly Hall had never been so full. Leaders from every nation sat shoulder to shoulder as screens displayed the alien ship looming in orbit. The usual diplomatic protocols were abandoned in the face of humanity's greatest crisis. Secretary General Maya Patil opened the emergency summit with uncharacteristic bluntness. "We have 29 days to decide the fate of our planet. Every option must be considered." Defense Advisor William Nash took the podium first. His presentation was short and sobering. "Our current military capabilities cannot match their technology," he explained, showing comparison charts. "Their ships' energy readings suggest weapons that could devastate continents. If this comes to direct conflict, we would be fighting with bows and arrows against nuclear weapons." Murmurs of fear rippled through the assembly. Ambassador Susan Miller spoke next. "We should not dismiss diplomatic options. Many Earth nations have faced seemingly hopeless situations against superior forces, yet found ways to negotiate terms that preserve their essential freedoms." "Negotiate submission?" asked the Russian president. "They demand our surrender, not our friendship." "We don't know enough about their culture or intentions," Susan replied. "Perhaps what they call incorporation allows more autonomy than we assume." The debate grew heated until a quiet man in a rumpled suit approached the podium. Engineer Peter Collins had not been scheduled to speak, but Dr. Garcia had insisted on his inclusion. "I lead a classified research team that has been developing quantum barrier technology," he said, his voice steady despite rarely addressing such audiences. "Our prototype successfully deflected energy weapons in testing last month." The room fell silent. "It's not perfect," Peter continued. "The system can only protect limited areas and requires enormous power. But with global cooperation, we could deploy a planetary shield within 3 weeks. A shield against alien weapons we know nothing about." President Chen of China questioned. "The technology operates on fundamental physical principles," Peter explained. "Their energy weapons, however advanced, would still interact with our quantum fields." Leaders whispered among themselves until General Winters stood. "The UEDF recommends a dual approach: prepare diplomatic responses while accelerating defensive measures. We cannot negotiate effectively from a position of absolute vulnerability." Dr. Garcia joined the discussion next. Their message reveals something important. They referred to historically unsuccessful resistance. "This suggests other civilizations have resisted before us." "And failed," someone pointed out. "Yes, but it confirms we're not the first. Their empire has a pattern. Understanding that pattern might reveal weaknesses." As the summit continued into night, 2 clear factions emerged: those who believed resistance was futile and dangerous, and those who refused to surrender Earth's independence without a fight. When the final vote came, it was surprisingly decisive. "Earth rejects the terms of the Xeraxian Empire," Secretary General Patel announced. "We will establish unified defense protocols while maintaining open channels for equal diplomatic dialogue." The resolution passed with 142 nations in favor, 31 abstaining, and none opposed. As the assembly disbanded, Susan Miller approached William Nash and Peter Collins. "I hope we haven't just signed humanity's death warrant," she said quietly. William's expression remained grim. "Freedom has always carried risks." "It's not about winning a direct confrontation," Peter added. "It's about making subjugation too costly for them to pursue." Outside the United Nations building, crowds had gathered as news of the alien ultimatum spread. Facing an existential threat, old conflicts between nations seemed suddenly trivial. In orbit, the Xeraxian ship maintained its silent vigil, its crew likely confident in the pattern that had brought 27 civilizations into their empire before. They didn't yet understand that humans followed patterns of their own. Throughout history, they had always fought hardest when facing impossible odds. The Global Military Command Center, built beneath the Rocky Mountains, buzzed with activity. Colonel Alan Wright studied the holographic map showing defense installations across Earth. His weathered face revealed little emotion, but his eyes never stopped moving, assessing every detail. "Status report on the Asian-Pacific Shield nodes," he ordered. 73% operational, sir," replied Lieutenant Kelly Barnes. "Supply chain issues in Indonesia, but we're working around them." Colonel Wright nodded. 26 days remained before the deadline, and progress was better than expected. The unthinkable threat had accomplished what decades of diplomacy couldn't: True global cooperation. Across the world, former enemies now shared military resources and scientific knowledge. Ancient rivalries were set aside as humanity prepared for its greatest challenge. In Los Angeles, Dr. Garcia hadn't slept properly in days. She and Peter Collins had converted an abandoned shopping mall into their primary research facility, where hundreds of scientists worked in shifts to refine the quantum shield technology. "The power requirements are still too high," Peter said, rubbing his tired eyes. "At current levels, we can only maintain full coverage for 6 hours before global electrical systems start failing." Olivia adjusted parameters on her tablet. "What if we cycle the shields? Concentrate power where it's needed most during an attack?" "Possible, but it would require split-second timing and predictive algorithms we haven't perfected yet." They were interrupted by Natalie Summers, a former cybersecurity expert now leading the counterintelligence division. "We've detected unusual data patterns in our communication networks," she reported. "Someone or something is mapping our response capabilities." Olivia frowned. "They're gathering intelligence." "It gets worse," said Eric Powell, Natalie's colleague who specialized in signal analysis. "The patterns match known Hyraxian transmission formats. They've likely deployed stealth probes within our atmosphere." This new information was immediately relayed to Colonel Wright, who called an emergency meeting of the Defense Council. While they discussed options, notification came that a small alien shuttle was requesting permission to land. "They're sending an envoy," Ambassador Miller reported. "They claim it's for peaceful discussion of transition terms." Colonel Wright's expression hardened. "More likely reconnaissance." "Either way," the Secretary General replied, "this is our chance to learn more about them." The shuttle will be permitted to land under strict protocols. 3 days later, the Hyraxian envoy Zareth stood in the United Nations building. The alien was tall and slender with iridescent skin and 4 arms. Its translator device converted its melodic language into flat, precise English. "The Empire appreciates your willingness to discuss incorporation terms," Zareth stated. "Many civilizations waste valuable resources in pointless resistance." Ambassador Miller maintained a diplomatic smile. "We have many questions about what incorporation means for Earth." As the official talks proceeded, Natalie and Eric monitored every aspect of the aliens' visit. They detected subtle scanning technologies in the envoy's ceremonial garments and blocked most of the signals. "They're assessing our technological level, military capabilities, and social structures," Natalie reported. "This isn't diplomacy, it's target analysis." More concerning was what Dr. Garcia discovered through careful analysis of the envoy's statements. References to other civilizations revealed a pattern. The Empire had conquered at least 27 other species through similar ultimatums. "They've done this before," she told Colonel Wright. "They issue demands, gauge resistance, then adjust their approach accordingly." "How many of those 27 successfully resisted?" Wright asked. Olivia's expression was grim. "None that they've mentioned." The colonel's jaw tightened. "Then we'll be the first." As Earth's 20-day countdown continued, the quantum shield grid expanded across continents and oceans. Humanity prepared for war while maintaining the appearance of considering surrender. In orbit, the massive Hyraxian ship waited, its crew confident in the inevitable outcome. After all, history was on their side. Commander Krell stood on the observation deck of the Hyraxian flagship, his 4 arms clasped behind his back as he studied the blue planet below. The ship's transparent viewing wall gave him a perfect view of Earth, so small and yet causing such unexpected complications. "Your assessment, Envoy Zareth?" he asked without turning. The recently returned envoy moved forward, bowing slightly. "The humans present an interesting case, Commander. They continue diplomatic discussions while clearly preparing for resistance. Like the Trilarians on Nexus IV," Krelvor noted. "They also played for time while building defenses. It did not save them." "There are differences, Commander. The humans have achieved global cooperation with remarkable speed. Their technological capabilities, while primitive compared to ours, show unusual adaptability." Krelvor made a dismissive gesture with his lower right arm. Every species believes they will be the exception. It is simply the denial phase of incorporation. He turned to his tactical officer, Sub-Commander Velex. How long until the deadline? 17 standard cycles, Commander. The humans have increased their defensive activities by 43% in the past cycle. Show me their progress. The viewing wall shifted to display multiple images of Earth's surface. Construction projects were visible on every continent, large circular structures connected by energy conduits. Military vessels patrolled the oceans, and primitive space vessels had positioned themselves at strategic points. Their efforts are impressive for such limited technology, Velex admitted, but ultimately futile. Krelvor studied the images thoughtfully. The Empire has standard protocols for a reason. Send probe ships to test their defenses. Use minimal force. We want them intact for integration. As you command. 6 sleek scout ships departed the flagship, descending toward Earth's atmosphere at various points around the globe. Their mission was simple: probe defenses, gather data, and demonstrate the futility of resistance. The first scout targeted a defense installation in what humans called North America. It fired a low-intensity energy burst expected to easily penetrate the primitive defenses. On Earth, alarms blared throughout the Global Military Command Center. Scout ships entering atmosphere, multiple locations, Lieutenant Barnes reported. Colonel Wright remained calm. Activate regional shields. Let's see what they're testing. Around the world, Peter Collins's quantum shield generators hummed to life. As the alien energy weapons struck, the shields shimmered but held, dispersing the energy harmlessly. Back on the flagship, Krelvor received unexpected reports. Commander, our scouts report weapon ineffectiveness against planetary defenses, Velex said, confusion evident in her voice. Impossible. Increase power to standard combat levels. The scouts attacked again, this time with weapons that could level small cities. Again, the quantum shields held, though power fluctuations across Earth's grid showed the strain. In the command center, Colonel Wright allowed himself a small smile. Looks like Collins's shields work better than expected. Dr. Garcia watched the energy readings with growing concern. They're still testing us, Alan. These aren't their most powerful weapons. On the flagship, Krelvor's skin darkened with anger, a rare display of emotion for his species. Recall the scouts, he ordered. This changes our approach. His senior officers gathered for an emergency council. The humans have developed shield technology beyond their expected capabilities, Krelvor stated. This resistance cannot be tolerated. A pattern of expansion must continue. Should we extend their deadline? Asked Zareth. Perhaps offer more favorable terms. No. Krelvor's voice was firm. That would encourage others to resist. We will proceed with standard subjugation protocol. Deploy the full incorporation fleet. Throughout the massive ship, preparations began. Soldiers were awakened from stasis chambers, weapons systems charged. Transport vessels prepared for ground deployment. The humans call their defense plan Operation Sovereign Will, Velex reported. Their communications suggest they expect to prevail. Krelvor made a sound that approximated laughter. 27 civilizations had similar hopes. All now served the Empire. On Earth, the response teams analyzed data from the brief encounters with the scout ships. They'll be back, Colonel Wright told the Defense Council. And next time, they won't be testing. As both sides prepared for conflict, the deadline for Earth's surrender drew closer. The Empire had never failed to incorporate a targeted world, but then again, they had never encountered humans before. The orbital defense platform Alpha 7 floated silently above Earth. Captain John Mercer stared at his command screen as red dots appeared at the edge of the solar system. Multiple ships detected, reported Communications Officer Lisa Hayes. Count is 23 vessels approaching from beyond Mars orbit. John took a deep breath. Alert all stations. This is not a drill. The Exorexian deadline had expired 6 hours ago. Earth had sent its formal rejection of the Empire's terms, and now the response was coming. On Earth, Colonel Wright activated global defense protocols. Shield generators to standby. All military forces to designated positions. Dr. Garcia and Peter Collins monitored the quantum shield network from their command center. The system now covered 94% of Earth's populated areas, but power concerns remained. "We can sustain full shields for approximately 7 hours," Peter reported. "After that, we'll need to cycle protection by region." Olivia nodded grimly. "Let's hope it's enough." In space, Captain Mercer watched as the Exoraxian fleet approached. His vessel, the UEDS Defender, was Earth's most advanced military spacecraft, but it was a toy compared to the alien warships. "They're forming attack positions," said Tactical Officer Ben Rivera. "Lead vessels accelerating toward our defense grid." "Hold positions," John ordered calmly. "Remember the plan. We're not trying to win a direct confrontation." The first Hyraxian attack came swiftly. Energy beams lanced toward Earth's orbital defenses, striking with force that made the platforms shudder. "Shields holding at 82%, reported Engineering Officer Maria Daniels. "But we can't take many more hits like that." John opened a channel to all Earth forces. "Implement evasive pattern Delta. Make them work for every shot." The human vessels began complex maneuvers, forcing the Exoraxians to divide their attention. It wasn't much, but it bought precious time. On the Exoraxian command ship, Commander Krelvor watched with growing irritation. "Their resistance is more coordinated than anticipated. Target their primary defense satellites." 3 massive warships broke formation, heading directly for Earth's main orbital platforms. Their weapons charged, glowing with deadly energy. Colonel Wright saw the threat immediately. "They're targeting our orbital shield generators. Captain Mercer, can you intercept?" "Negative," John replied. "We'd be destroyed before making impact." Wright turned to Dr. Garcia. "It's time. Activate the primary shield." Olivia and Peter exchanged glances before simultaneously turning keys in their control panels. Throughout the planet, massive generators surged to full power. As the Exoraxian ships fired, a shimmering blue barrier materialized around Earth. The energy weapons struck the quantum shield with tremendous force, but rather than breaking through, the energy dispersed across the field in beautiful, terrifying patterns. In the command center, alarms blared as power systems strained. "Shield holding," Peter reported, his voice tight. "But power consumption is higher than predicted. We have maybe 4 hours instead of 7. On his ship, Captain Mercer saw an opportunity. "All vessels target the lead Exoraxian ship while their weapons are in cooldown cycle." Earth's small fleet concentrated fire on one alien vessel. Their weapons seemed ineffective at first, but as they continued targeting the same section of hull, they finally broke through. The Exoraxian ship listed to one side, leaking atmosphere. Commander Krelvor couldn't hide his surprise. "They damaged the Relentless. How is this possible?" "Their weapons are primitive," his tactical officer replied, "but they identified a vulnerability in our shield harmonic." Krelvor's eyes narrowed. "Adjust attack pattern. Retreat to middle orbit, and concentrate fire on their shield generators." For 3 more hours, the battle raged. Earth's defenses held, but the strain showed. Power grids across the planet fluctuated, and sections of the shield weakened. Finally, as Earth's resources neared depletion, the Exoraxian fleet suddenly pulled back. "They're retreating," John announced, disbelief in his voice. On Earth, celebrations began cautiously. In the command center, Colonel Wright remained focused. "This was just the first wave," he warned. "They're regrouping, not surrendering." Dr. Garcia studied the data from the battle. "We hurt them more than they expected. They'll be back with a different strategy." "At least we know our defenses work," Peter added quietly. Across Earth, people looked to the sky with new hope. For the first time in galactic history, A planet had successfully repelled the initial Seraxian assault. The real war, however, had only just begun. The massive vessel that entered Earth's solar system dwarfed the previous Seraxian ships. Nearly 10 miles long, its surface bristled with weapons systems and launch bays. Earth's sensors detected it 3 days after the first battle. Imperial War Master vessel, Colonel Wright announced to the Emergency Council, their equivalent of a supreme military commander. Dr. Garcia studied the sensor readings with growing concern. It's not alone. At least 30 support ships are traveling with it. Since repelling the first attack, Earth had worked frantically to repair and enhance defenses. Power systems for the quantum shields had been improved, but not enough to withstand sustained assault from a force this size. "How long until they reach Earth?" asked Secretary General Patel. 12 hours at current speed, Wright replied. Ambassador Miller looked up from her notes. "We should attempt communication. Their response to our defense might have changed their position." Wright's expression remained skeptical, but he nodded. "We can try, but also prepare for the worst." In orbit, Captain Mercer and the surviving Earth fleet took defensive positions. The UEDS Defender had suffered damage in the previous battle but remained operational. "All ships report ready, Captain," said Lisa Hayes, her voice steady despite the odds they faced. "Let's hope we don't need to fight this time," John replied, though he didn't believe it. The Imperial War Master's message arrived before his fleet did. It displayed on screens worldwide, showing a massive Exaraxian with elaborate armor and scarification patterns marking his high rank. "I am Imperial War Master Drazik. Your resistance has caused the Empire unnecessary inconvenience. This defiance ends today. Surrender now, and we may still incorporate your species without significant population reduction." Earth's leaders sent their reply. "We remain open to equal diplomatic relations, but will defend our independence." 6 hours later, the battle began. The Imperial fleet launched its attack with overwhelming force. Multiple shield generators failed in the first wave as energy weapons more powerful than anything seen before struck Earth's defenses. Shields failing in sectors 7 through 13. Peter shouted over the alarms in the command center. The ground itself seemed to shake as massive weapons impacted the weakening quantum barrier. "Divert all available power," Olivia ordered. "We need to hold until the secondary systems come online." In space, Earth's fleet engaged in desperate combat. 3 human vessels were destroyed in the first minutes of the battle. The Defender took heavy damage, but continued fighting. "Hull breach on Deck 4. Ben Rivera reported to Captain Mercer. "Sealing bulkheads." "Stay with them," John ordered, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "Target their launch bays. Stop those landing craft." Despite their efforts, Seraxian transports broke through, landing in multiple locations across Earth. Ground forces engaged under Colonel Wright's coordination. "They've landed in Brazil, Kenya, and China," Wright reported. "Local forces engaging but are outmatched." As the battle reached its 3rd hour, Earth's situation grew desperate. The quantum shield flickered dangerously. Power systems worldwide strained to breaking point. Ambassador Susan Miller made a surprising request. "I need a direct channel to the Imperial fleet, not to the War Master, but on general frequencies." "What are you planning?" Wright asked. "Something unexpected," she replied. Given authorization, Susan broadcast a message not of surrender, but addressed to the Empire's member species. "To all beings serving under Imperial control, we fight not just for Earth, but for the freedom of all worlds. The Empire calls us primitive, yet we have damaged their ships and defied their ultimatum. If we can resist, so can you." In space, something unexpected happened. 2 smaller Xeraxian vessels suddenly changed course, firing upon their own flagship. Meanwhile, Natalie Summers and Eric Powell activated Operation Lighthouse, powerful transmitters broadcasting Earth's battle and Susan's message across all known galactic frequencies. "Let the galaxy see that resistance is possible," Natalie said as the system came online. The War Master's fury was visible even through the damaged communication screens. "Cease this transmission immediately. This is Imperial treason." But the message continued to spread, and on 3 Empire ships, crews from previously conquered worlds began internal rebellions. As Earth's shields neared complete failure and ground forces fought desperately against superior technology, hope came from an unexpected source. Discord within the Empire itself. The Imperial War Master's flagship shuddered as another explosion rocked its port side. Not from Earth's defenders, but from the Trilarian cruiser that had turned against its masters. Throughout the massive vessel, warning signals blared. "Suppress these rebellions immediately," War Master Drozic commanded, his skin flushing dark with rage. "Execute any crew showing disloyalty." But the damage was done. Ambassador Miller's message had reached the subjugated species serving within the Empire's own fleet. Inspired by Earth's defiance, long-suppressed resentments boiled over into open revolt. On Earth, Colonel Wright received the unexpected news with cautious optimism. "We have reports of fighting aboard at least 6 enemy vessels. Their attack coordination is breaking down." Dr. Garcia looked up from her console, exhaustion evident on her face. "The shield is still failing. We have maybe 20 minutes before complete collapse. Then we take the fight to them," said Captain Mercer over the communication link. His ship, the Defender, had survived despite severe damage. "All remaining Earth vessels, form up. We're making a run at their command ship." The small fleet of human ships, joined by 2 rebel alien vessels, accelerated toward the Imperial flagship. It was a desperate gamble, but Earth had run out of defensive options. Across the planet, humanity fought with everything they had. In Brazil, soldiers led by Major Frank Lewis held the line against alien ground forces, using knowledge of the terrain to counter superior technology. In Kenya, local defense units under Captain Diana Young executed hit-and-run tactics that confused the Imperial troops unused to adaptive resistance. "We need more time," Peter Collins said, frantically working on his final project. "The quantum displacement field isn't stable yet." "You've got 15 minutes, Wright replied grimly. "Make it count." The offensive against the War Master's ship met fierce resistance. 2 more Earth vessels were destroyed, and the Defender took critical damage. "We can't break through their defenses," John reported, as his bridge filled with smoke. "You don't need to," Olivia responded. "Just keep them focused on you for a few more minutes." Beneath the Rocky Mountains, Olivia and Peter made final adjustments to a device they had developed in secret. Based on the same quantum principles as the shield, it was designed not to block energy, but to displace it, shifting matter between dimensional states. "If this works," Peter said quietly, "it will affect all Cyraxian technology within the solar system." "And if it doesn't?" asked Natalie, who had joined them for the final phase. "Then Earth falls," Olivia answered simply. "But we were never going to surrender anyway." As the planet's shields began to collapse sector by sector, Colonel Wright gave the order. "All Earth forces, Operation Sovereign Will is now in final phase. Execute Protocol Omega." Throughout the world, remaining military units launched coordinated attacks against Imperial forces, not to win, but to distract, to keep the enemy's attention away from what was happening in the command center. In space, Captain Mercer received the coded message. "All Allied vessels, pull back beyond the lunar orbit. Repeat, all vessels beyond lunar orbit immediately." "What about the ground forces?" asked Lisa Hayes as they executed the retreat. John's expression was solemn. "They know the stakes. We all do." In the command center, Olivia and Peter initiated the quantum displacement device. The massive machine hummed to life, drawing power from Earth's remaining energy reserves. Displacement field activating in 3, 2, 1. A wave of invisible energy expanded outward from Earth, passing through normal matter, but interacting with the specific atomic structure of Cyraxian technology. Throughout the solar system, Imperial ships began to shimmer and partially phase out of normal spacetime. On the flagship, War Master Drozik watched in disbelief as his vessel became partially transparent. What is this primitive trickery? The effect wasn't permanent, but it didn't need to be. For critical minutes, Imperial weapons and propulsion systems became non-functional as they shifted between dimensional states. Earth seized the opportunity. The remaining defense forces, led by the damaged Defender, launched a final assault against the disoriented Imperial fleet. "This is Captain John Mercer to all Imperial forces," he broadcast. "Leave Earth space immediately or be destroyed. You have 5 minutes to comply." Faced with rebellions among their subjugated species, malfunctioning technology, and continued human resistance, the Imperial command made an unprecedented decision. The War Master's flagship, once it regained propulsion capability, turned away from Earth.